Boa
É
noite a
nóis.
todos. Boa noite aí mais uma vez a todos pela participação. Nós estamos chegando na reta final aí da nossa semana SOC Brasil de encerramento do ano 2022, né? O SOC Brasil Week. Hoje estamos aí com a presença do nosso Minions preferido, Bruno Guerreiro, e junto com as nossas intérpretes, elas estão aí ocultas, mas elas estão participando aí assiduamente aí junto da entrega desse resultado para todos vocês aí, com a Marisa, a Cristina e a Bel Lucas. Mais uma vez, obrigado, meninas, e obrigado, Guerreiro, pela sua participação. E eu te passo a palavra agora para fazer todo o congratulations do nosso amigo Jay Jay.
Que é isso, eu que agradeço, Kremer, nosso âncora favorito aqui do SOC Brasil, um rostinho bonito na televisão, diferente do resto de nós, né? As meninas aqui, Cristine, Marise e Bel. A Bel tá aqui, tá, pessoal? A Bel tá aqui, ela tá com vergonha de aparecer, eu falo mesmo na cara dela, que ela
Eu,
tá com
tam-
vergonha aqui de
eu também vou
aparecer.
falar que ela estava deitada ali quando ela apareceu. Estava na cama
Mas
deitada dormindo.
esse projeto, ó, ela até se escondeu agora, ficou com vergonha. Esse projeto é muito interessante para todos nós, né? Uma parceria aqui, ó, do outro lado, uma parceria da Sans, SOC Cloud, Zup, DataSec, para trazer para vocês conteúdo relevante de Security Operations, segurança da informação, SOC, SecOps, chamem como vocês quiserem. Tá? Então, a gente, na nossa programação, tinha planejado para hoje fazer um bate-papo, né, com o Jay Jay Davey. Jay Davey, para quem acompanha aí o ecossistema de Security Operations, é um cara que fala bastante de engajamento, de team building, de capacitação profissional, de Blue Team. Ele tem um projeto bem interessante chamado Cyber Security Dojo. Recentemente criou outro projeto chamado SecOps Institute, que é para a gente pensar do ponto de vista de metodologia de Security Operations, como que a gente pode evoluir, né? Então, infelizmente, a gente não conseguiu trazer ele ao vivo e a cores aqui nesse momento, mas a gente gravou com ele uma sessão, ele pediu para a gente para antecipar um pouquinho essa gravação por questões de timing e questões também de prioridade ali, né? Ele está nativo ainda em operações de segurança, então ele tinha alguns compromissos nesse horário com clientes dele, então ele pediu para a gente gravar. A gente gravou essa sessão hoje um pouco mais cedo com eles, e o nosso objetivo hoje aqui é dar o playback nessa gravação, efetuando a tradução simultânea com as meninas, com a Cristina, com a Marisa, para trazer para vocês esse conteúdo. E depois desse conteúdo, né, depois dessa gravação, desse playback, a gente volta aqui para essa discussão colegiada com o nosso amigo Kramer, comigo, para a gente discutir um pouquinho de tudo isso, né, do que a gente ouviu, do que a gente aprendeu com ele, e está aqui compartilhando com vocês, tá? Então, novamente, obrigado pela presença de vocês. A gente sabe que é difícil manter essa cadência durante uma semana contínua. Hoje já estamos numa quinta-feira de um quase Natal, quase final de Copa do Mundo. Eu não fui convidado pelo Tite, infelizmente, não pela minha capacidade futebolística, mas estamos aqui tentando trazer esse engajamento para vocês, tá bom? Então, Kramer, vamos tocar o barco. Pessoal, se inscrevam aí, né? O Kramer até botou na tela como que a gente faz o processo de
Isso.
entrar na salinha em tradução, né? Na salinha em tradução simultânea, e a gente vai dar o playback daqui
Só,
a
re-
2 minutinhos nessa
Só
tradução
reforçando
simultânea.
essa questão da tradução, eu coloquei aqui o arquivo mais uma vez aqui no chat para todos. Quem quiser aí fazer o download e está fazendo uso, se tiver alguma dificuldade, eu mandei o arquivo
Boa.
aqui no chat do webinar. Eu vou estar agora
Legal.
compartilhando a
Então,
nossa
vamos
gravação.
todo mundo que quiser ouvir língua portuguesa, se inscrever ali na salinha do Translate em português. Quem não se importar em ouvir em inglês, pode ficar aqui nessa mesma sala conosco. A gente vai tirar nossa carinha bonita e depois fazer o fechamento dessa nossa sessão, tá bom?
Lembrando
Kremer,
que,
está
nessa,
com você, meu amigo.
lembrando que nessa gravação aí a gente tem a presença ilustre do nosso âncora Ivan Salles também.
Graças a Deus, que é quem resolve os problemas. A gente está aqui só fazer graça.
Alright.
Okay, so here we are again, and this time with Jay Jay Davey. Jay Jay, thank you so much for being here with us right now during this week. This is the SOC Brazil week, the 22. This event that we create here to support our security operations community in Brazil, in Latin America, and we are bringing you guys as guests and professionals that are sharing a lot of information with our community. So thank you, name of Brazil, to be here with us.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So let's start a little bit, right? So the topic that we prepared during this week that we consider that JJ could help us a lot to understand about is regarding the JJ contribution, right? So I do know a lot of your contribution to SOC community as SOC Dojo and SecOps Institute, but we would like you introduce yourself and those kind of projects to our community, if you can. Please.
Yeah, before you start, I have to say that I'm a LinkedIn fan of you. I'm following your posts every single day.
We are
super beautiful, super helpful for the community. For that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. So my name's Jay Jay Davey. I've been in cybersecurity now for 5 years. Been in technology now for roughly around 10 to 11 years. Started off in the armed forces as a network engineer. Worked my way up from there. Got into cybersecurity roughly around 2017 after the back end of the WannaCry attacks, and I swiftly went into becoming a SOC analyst, and my career kind of exploded from there. Done a bit of pen testing, didn't really enjoy it too much, and I found that security operations was really where my heart was. So fast forward to 2022 to today, I am involved in a lot of projects. I help run the Cyber Mentor Dojo, which is a platform for any cybersecurity professional of any capacity to find a mentor or become a mentor. And I've also just started an initiative called the Security Operations Institute, or the SecOps Institute. And that's because of a certain problem that I can talk about a little bit later on, but that's something that I'm working on. I'll touch on that a little bit later on. And I've also working with Security Blue Team. I'm helping develop some content as well for potential SOC managers in the future to help them improve and increase their effectiveness.
Where are you living now, JJ? Which country you are living?
So I'm actually in the United Kingdom. So I'm in like a little town near London. So I actually am near London. So not like a few hundred miles away. I'm actually quite close to London. But yeah, I'm in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, the fun thing that I'm living in London as well. I'm living in London, Ontario, in Canada. Same name, different.
Yeah, it's true. But this is very nice because we had some guests here, some living from US. Ivan right now is living in Canada. I'm living in Brazil. You're living in London. And most of the time we can see the same goals and same challenges all over the place, right? So we can see the Europe security operations perspective and Europe challenges are very much similar to Latin American operational perspective and challenges, and North America as well. So what are right now your main challenges that just to make sure, why did you create those kind of projects as Cyber Mentor Dojo and Security Institute? Because as community pros here that we do know there is a lot of work. We do know there is a lot of personal effort, personal work that sometimes can lead to financial perspective or not, or just to give right to community. So why you create that?
So I'll touch on the Security Operations Institute because it's quite pertinent to security operations. But every SOC that I've been in and every SOC manager that I talked to over my career, they've all had the same kind of problems. And I thought, right, okay, how do we solve these problems? How do we approach these problems in a way that we can improve our operations and improve our function? And I started to look at the problems from a completely different angle. So everybody looks at these problems from a technical perspective. And I'm thinking, right, okay, the technical stuff, it's not working. We're chucking SOARs and SIMs and EDRs. we're getting all of this data, we're getting all this really fancy tooling, but it's not solving our problems. So I thought, right, the problem is something completely different. So I was looking at process improvement. How do we measure the effectiveness of the security operations? What is the security operations actually meant to deliver? And how do we refine that and align that to the organizational objectives? So looking at this kind of misalignment and the ability to measure the security operations to understand if we are doing a good job or if we're not doing a good job. I mean, we can have the best technology in the world, but if we're not aligned to the mission of the business and we don't have the right means and methods to measure our output, then we don't know if we're actually doing a good job or not. Yes, we could spend all day ticking off alerts, but is that meaningful? Is it actually having a positive impact? So I thought, right, let me research this and let me build a website around my research. So my website has two angles. There's one angle where I want to point people in the right direction of training resources. So if they want to become a SOC analyst, they go to that website, they get some training resources, and it's all laid out for them. And the other angle is, if you're a SOC manager, you can go onto that website and you can relate to potential problems and see how I've unpacked it with my research. So I've done lots of research over the years. I've read a few books around process improvement, around business management, and I've been trying to tie that into security operations. So that website is there to help managers improve their effectiveness of their function.
That's really great. One thing that I really love in your approach that I don't know if it's planned or not, but I can notice that you have a personal you are worried how you can help people more than technology or process. You know, that's other things are important, but in your approach, that the thing that I really love, that's how we have it to help people. And can you tell a little bit more about that? How you can help people?
Yeah, in our discussion here in our community as well, most of the time we are talking to our practitioners and somebody like a SOC manager, etc. That good processes are created by good people, not the opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. So first thing, we need to make sure we are surrounded by good people, idealist people, passionate people, thoughtful people that probably will create good process and good technology. Right. So that's why we do love your work here, because you are always trying to improve, okay, the process for company process, but also the people that are running and create those processes, right? So tell us a little about that perspective in general, because that perspective is not company oriented, it's completely personal oriented.
Yeah, so I had a quite enlightening call with a mentor about a year ago, and we had what at the time it was quite a heated argument, because I have my own biases and my mentor was very highly educated and was speaking from a voice of logic, and he said the statement, security is a people problem. So I said, okay. He explained it to me. Eventually I was like, actually, yeah, you're right. So I started to unpack that. I said, okay, well, if it's a people problem, why don't we look at changing people's perspectives, changing people's views? So when a security operations analyst has been in the SOC for a long time, they get stuck in this way of doing things. They approach the problems the exact same way day in, day out. But that problem that they're approaching that exact same way each time could potentially be the output of a bad process. So a bad process may be leading them to do the same thing day in, day out. And then they lead to burnout, and then they leave to another job, and the vicious cycle happens again. So I'm trying to approach it from an angle where I challenge people's perspectives and I get them to think about the problem, to understand what is going on, what's being caused, so what's the causation of this problem, and are they just dealing with the side effects? It's like when you have an illness, do you go and improve your diet and your exercise, or do you just treat the symptoms and just get medication? Because most of the time we treat the symptoms by putting technology on top or filtering a bad process into a good process, when we should be looking further down the line to say, okay, this high workload or this high rate of false positives is being caused by our lack of oversight or our lack of willingness to go and change the process of tuning. So it's all about challenging the perspective and getting people to actually think about the problem in a logical manner.
Is that influenced by the Stoicism?
Yes, yeah. So I do have quite a heavy influence from philosophers, and I read quite a lot of books on philosophy. But a lot of times it's all about inner reflection, and I think if you could do that inner reflection to the SOC, you start to improve effectiveness. I mean, it doesn't even have to cost a lot of money. A lot of the time, SOCs actually already have the resources available to get to stage 5 in the maturity scale. I said, well, we just need to look at where we currently are, look at our problems, look at what we're dealing with, and think, right, okay, how do we get better? And that's what I try to give people the answer to.
Yeah, this is very interesting because most of the guests that we had right now, I think you do know most of them, Chris Crowley, Joe Slowick, all those guys as you, they have the same, this is very interesting because their hard skills are very different perspective. Chris is more oriented to the long-term game and strategic alignment to the business. And Joe is more oriented to threat detection itself, right? The real detection, the real technical stuff and adversarial stuff. And Rob is oriented to process methodologies. And you are bringing another point of view that is people methodology. But all of you, they have the same idea. That is the same idea that is to, despite using technology and process, start to think before act. Right, is to have the appropriate time to think. So I personally think this is the biggest difference between a good SOC and a bad SOC. Is not how much work we put in the arms, but how much work we put in the head. Right, the time to think, the time to reflect, the time to investigate, the time to try something else. Okay, this works, that does not work. Even for technology can be closed source or open source, and process can be outside the process like outsourcing services, etc., or enclosing services, etc. But most of the time, people don't have the time to think. They don't get it that they need to think to have their own decision making before moving around. You're seeing this kind of situation in Europe as well.
Yeah, and I think the biggest issue is most security operations centers are set up in a reaction to a problem that occurred. So a breach happened, let's get a detection and response capability. But there's no strategy to then mature that capability. And it's not till you get a SOC manager in to say, actually, let's step back a little bit, understand what is the objective, what is the risks that we're actually trying to manage with the presence of a SOC. Okay, ransomware. Let's take that for example. Brilliant. So we're trying to measure ourselves against managing ransomware. Okay, so we need to have the metrics to detect our capabilities of how well we can get visibility of ransomware, how well we can do threat hunting against ransomware, the reporting metrics of maybe threat intelligence versus what we're seeing inside our environment. There's lots of different metrics that we can start to put in place that measure our performance against our risk of ransomware. A lot of them don't actually have that capability to turn around to themselves and say, actually, we don't know what we're here for. Most people think, oh, we're here just to detect and respond. I take it back. I say, okay, but why? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I said, well, if you can answer the why you're here, you can align yourself so much better and you start to become a serious player. I was speaking to a CISO not long ago, and he was asking me, how do I improve my SOC? And I said, well, what do you want from your SOC? And he said these things. Okay, I went, all right, okay. So have you actually sat down and talked about those things? I went, no. I went, okay, well, what you need to do is get to the SOC manager and bang your heads together and think, right, how are we going to deliver these particular things? And he said, right, okay. So he came back to me a little bit later and said, oh, we've stripped everything back. We've actually got rid of some technology, and we started to look at other technology that can help us there. And I said, okay, brilliant. So now we're starting to think. So we started to do an assessment, understanding what level of maturity is that. I said, okay, right, now let's get a mission statement and align it to what you're trying to achieve, because you have an information security strategy, you have a risk management strategy a little bit higher up. Okay, brilliant. So now how do we reflect what the SOC is trying to do against what you're trying to do and let them complement each other? Otherwise, you just have these microorganisms or these micro ecosystems that just don't work together. They're just separate from each other. It's like, well, how do we tie them in? And that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to get people to think about. The SOC is not just a bolt-on function. It's a way to proactively identify risk, to detect and respond, to manage impact, to control vulnerability levels, to do all of these different things if you let it.
Excellent. So this brings some ideas here that I work also for some customers and lectures. That is, most of the companies mature, at least they have the CISOs, they have the risk managers, etc., and they are strategy oriented, right? So they are risk strategy oriented. And most of the companies, even standard ones, they have the operational perspective. They have IT operations, they have cybersecurity operations, firewall management, antivirus management, vulnerability management, etc. But most of those companies, even the big ones and the small ones, they lack the integration. They lack the tactical management. That is someone that can bring that together and punch that together. Okay, that operation makes sense to that goal, and that other operation makes sense to other goal, and that operation don't make sense at all. I can remove that, and there is no big deal from my strategy, you know. So I think that is SOC is pretty much about that middle management term. The SOC management layer, SOC management capability and architecture is totally aligned with that strategy, because we can have MDR operation, we can have vulnerability management operation, but we can have that without a SOC, right? So there is no strategy, there is no related strategy. And I think that is the SOC part, is the thinking and the building strategy, the architecture strategy. What do you consider about it? You're seeing this kind of misconceptions as well, because here in Brazil, we do have a lot of people that think that a SOC, Security Operations Center, is totally related to monitoring capability and not the whole strategy, you know?
Yeah, so I see this quite a lot, and it's quite a big problem. Is a lot of senior security leaders are going to their SOC managers and saying, right, tell me what I want to know, not tell me what I need to know. And at no point do they have a conversation where it's like, well, actually, what do you need to know? And the CISO goes, oh, you've got me there. When there should be a shared kind of strategy, there should be a clear defined strategy on paper that the SOC manager can just go into the folder, pick it up, and just go, right, okay, I need to align to this. The CISO is steering the ship in terms of the information security strategy. I need to make sure that my detection and response capabilities align to this, and I can prove my alignment through metrics. So I can measure my performance against this strategy. So there needs to be that communication between the senior leadership in security, so that strategic level, and the operational level. And if the operational level is aligned to the strategic, then by default, the tactical levels are going to follow suit. If there is a misalignment there and a mismatch, then it's simply going to be a cost center. There's not actually going to be meaningful metrics that come from the SOC that tell the senior leader that they're doing a good job. And another thing is actually misaligned metrics. So some SOCs have metrics that say everything's fine, everything's going well, when the whole idea of a metric is to find out what's going wrong, find out where you can improve. And no one actually goes, actually, are we actually getting the right message from these metrics, or are we just doing these metrics to massage our ego and make ourselves feel better?
Yeah, and this brings us also, Ivan, please, you know that I'm talking.
No, I have a point here. You mentioned many times about SOC manager, right? So are we living a shortage of good SOC managers around the world? What is your opinion about that?
I think we have plenty of good SOC managers. I think the problem is the ability to communicate. So a lot of SOC managers, they come from a background that's heavily technical. So they're used to speaking to a technical audience. They're used to that. But when you get to that SOC management level, you start to bridge into GRC a little bit. You start to learn about the governance of a business. You learn about the risk and the compliance requirements. So I think we don't have bad SOC managers. What we do have is a kind of lack of understanding at that level. Is they're getting thrusted into this management perspective, this management role, and they need to see things differently. And they approach a lot of these problems too technically still. So we have a lot of technical SOC managers, which is fine. If you have a technical SOC manager, have a head of SOC that can speak and be that trusted translator. So we need SOC managers to be able to understand risk management from a business perspective. So get rid of all that tech and learn about it from a business perspective. Learn about information security strategy, how they're formulated, how they're built. And I'm talking beyond CISP and CISM. I'm talking, actually picking up your current policies and processes, understanding them from an information security perspective, and thinking, right, okay, now I know where I fit in the picture. Because at the moment, we're getting these heavily technical people at a level where they're talking to people that may not be technical. I mean, I've met a lot of CISOs that aren't technical at all. And you're there to be a translator, but if you can't translate and articulate to an audience at a different level, your message is going to get lost, and it's going to be very difficult for you to influence decisions and align to strategies if you can't have that mutual understanding.
I think I agree with you, and this brings me to something that here, as you said in the beginning, must be aligned, right? Because sometimes we can have a very technical SOC manager that's worked very well for a SOC that's oriented for IT operations, right? IT SOC management, right? So considering that all the preventive technology, alerting, investigation, etc., that SOC is planned to this layer, right, to technical layer, and works pretty well. But whenever these SOCs try to evolve to risk-based management, to risk-based and product-based management, like a P-search, right, a product search or a product-oriented SOC, it start to crashing down because that manager don't understand that perspective, right? So I think that is, again, we need to be very tied to what's the objective. Is IT SOC or business SOC? For a business SOC, I need to have someone that understands the business. It's impossible to have a business SOC or a product-oriented SOC if someone don't understand the product, someone don't understand the business. Even though it's very hard to have a IT operation SOC with someone that it comes from business and don't understand the IT. It's the same thing. We probably have the same issue. And as you said, the metrics is most of time that we see here, managers and SOC practitioners talking about metrics. Most of them are thinking, oh, I need to have some metric. So they are, their mindset is compliance based, right? They need to checklist that they have the metric. I have that metric. Okay, I have that metric. Okay, so my job is done. And for security operational perspective, we do know that there's no done, there's no job done, there's no finish line on that. So the metrics should be something to guide me where I need to improve or where I need to stop doing. This doesn't make sense at all. I need to stop doing that. The metrics should be something that make me change. If the metric is not make me change anything, there's useless metric. This is just a number. This is just an indicator we can talk about and see, okay, everything is green. So just paint that light to green and okay, there is no big issue on that.
Yep. I mean,
you have this kind of misconception there is still?
Yeah, I mean, I recently read a book called The Goal, and there was a chapter in the book where all the managers in this factory, they turned around and said, is our factory producing enough inventory to meet market demand? And one of the managers turned around and said, we don't know. I said, well, how can we tell? They said, oh, we would have to measure how much we're outputting against the inventory that we're inputting. I said, okay, right, have we got that? And they said no. So they went around to the individual departments, looked at all their metrics and looked at all of their reporting and pull it all together and started whiteboarding it and saying, right, okay, oh, we've got too much inventory here, or this process here is a little bit slow and it's holding up the factory. And for me, it's like, well, that's what metrics should be. They should tell you the problems, they should tell you the bottlenecks, they should tell you the constraints, because metrics aren't there to punish and massage egos. They're there to highlight improvement.
Excellent.
No, I have maybe tried to put the conversation in another direction. It's more, Jay, you know that oftentimes level 1 positions in the SOC are used to people break in the area, the cybersecurity area. No, and how you believe, how do you think that the mentoring programs can help people to break into the area?
So I think the biggest goal of mentors in that area is to clear out any misconceptions and really educate people, properly on what is required at those levels. So a lot of times we hear, the SOC is quite an easy place to break into. And then when they do break into it, they realize it's actually a very high-paced environment that actually requires you to move quite quickly and have a lot of skills already. You have to investigate alerts within SLAs. You got to, you're being measured against your mean time to respond, your mean time to resolve. All of these metrics you're pressing against you from a pressure perspective, and you have to deliver. So a lot of times people go, oh, I'm going to break into the SOC, and then 3 or 4 months down the line, they change their tone because they realize it's quite a hard job. So I think a mentor needs to really educate people on what is required at that level, what they need to come armed with, and what they need to expect. I mean, we're getting some extremely talented people coming from the entry level, but at the same time, they're not being fed the right information. So they're coming armed, and they know networking, they know programming, they know all these different skills. They can sit down in the SOC and they know what to do, but they don't know what to expect. So, you put them in front of a SIM and they can put together a query to find something. Put them in front of an incident, then they need to know how to build a query in enough time frame to get the right information to then help them resolve the incident. So it starts to expand into such a complex job of lots of different skills and requirements put together. So I think we need to be able to clear out any misconception and saying, hey, SOC is a good place to go, but are you sure? Because this is what could happen, and this is what you need to expect. Because I see a lot of people getting into that SOC and they break in a couple of months. And for me, it's like, well, we need to manage expectations. And that comes from a good mentor that can tell you what is what and what is not.
Great.
I think that something that helped me a lot during this process of SOC understanding and management understanding was the management understanding, not the technical operation, right? So I personally studied a lot of business management, like balance scorecard methodologies and OKRs methodologies, KPIs methodologies, also people management methodology. I studied a lot. I think that was the big difference for a SOC management perspective, to start think different, to start thinking from top to down and not from down to up, right? So of course, the technical part supports us a lot when we need to support the analyst and support him to create a detection, support him to investigate something. But I think the most critical part is that top level management, like a soccer trainer, right? A soccer coach that need to see the whole picture. They need to see the whole team working together and make small changes to make sure that everybody's taking the most of it. So I think that part that we should look in after and maybe start to support SOC managers. I do see a lot of content and training for SOC analysts, level 1 analysts, level 2 analysts, but there's small change, there's small information in the market for managers' perspective. How can we help to build someone as a SOC manager? What she or he need to know about? And as you said, you make sure you want to go that direction, because as you said, not with the same words, but we use it that same word with Rob, is expectations and frustrations. We need to make very sure that SOC management, there is expectations and will be frustrations a lot, and we need to be okay with that, you know.
Yeah, I think you've hit on quite an important point there, and that's something that Security Blue Team, who I'm working with at the moment, we've creating content called Certified Security Operations Manager, and it's going to be a course that's going to be around that business security operations level, and it's going to be affordable. But the whole purpose is helping somebody become a trusted translator from security operations to the business, and vice versa. They become that funnel from either side. And I think it's really difficult because not a lot of people out there can take business management and then take security operations and combine them together. Normally they're siloed off from each other, and that's where good SOC managers come into play, and that's when good SOCs really start to thrive, is when they have somebody that can join them together. But there's nothing out there. There's no course. There's the SANS course, there's the SANS Security Operations Manager course, but when CSOM comes out, there will only be those two courses. But then you look at SOC analyst courses, there's thousands of SOC analyst courses. So I think we need to have an educational shift. We need to start focusing on our education on the areas that just haven't got the education there. And I think, I don't know, education needs to have metrics to measure how much is there for a certain level. You got lots for engineers, you got lots for the analysts, but not a lot for the managers. I mean, you can tell a manager and say, actually, go read an MBA book, go read the goal, go read this, go read that. I said, well, but why? Why do they need to read it? And I think that's the most important part.
Excellent. And that does make a lot of sense also, because most of the time that, in my particular opinion, someone is promoted as a SOC manager. Normally, it comes from down up, right? It's a good analyst that become a leader, incident response leader or something else leader, and after that it comes to a manager. And I do know a lot of guys that are very good technically, but are incapable of managing something. And I do know some guys that are working very well on managing things, but are not the best analytical guys. So most of the time in some operations that I work with, I can see two kind of aspects. I can see a SOC manager acting as a manager layer, manager level, to discussing with the business and metrics and resources, and a SOC architect, and someone that is technical stuff, that is theoretical stuff, but cannot have the same kind of discussion in a business basis, but are very good for seeing the operation downs and etc. Do you and this is most of the time misconception. Some people think that the SOC manager should be the SOC architect, or the SOC architect should be the manager. And I can see both working together. What's your opinion about that?
So I think if you're going to get somebody just to manage people, process and technology, that's too much for one person to handle. And there's not going to be a clear focus for them, because they need to juggle many different balls just to keep the circus going. But if you break the roles down a little bit more, and you get maybe a dedicated architect or a dedicated engineer or senior engineer that's putting everything together, then the SOC manager can almost be the orchestrator, and the engineer is the guy that goes around and helps people's gives people the instruments and maintains the instruments to make sure that they are always going to be playing at the right note. I think you can't have somebody doing everything. You need to have a good team around you. So one of the most successful SOCs that I've seen is they've had a SOC manager, a leads. They've had, on the side of the leads, they've had a content development team that develop all the tuning, they develop all the rules, they install the tools and make sure all the analytics are working. And then they have processes that feed into the individual teams. So when a tier one analyst or a junior analyst closes down an alert, it will say, right, okay, it was a false positive. I now need to go get it tuned. So I would submit that to the content development team. It would go to the content development team that will then tune it, and it's improved. One of the biggest problems is that they don't have that in place. What they do is they say, right, We don't know how to solve this problem, but we have to live with it. And that is the kind of the criminal thing at the moment is a lot of SOC managers, they don't know how to solve these issues because they are very business focused at that stage and they lose that technical skill. And you need somebody to be able to pick up that slack. You need somebody to go, right, actually, okay, we could tune it, we could build this query and we can deploy this analytic and we can make the thing better. And they should work in tandem. If you're going to employ a SOC manager to do all of that, to manage the people, to implement the processes and measure the processes and to implement the technology and improve the technology, you're going to be in for a rough time.
Mm-hmm. So you said something very interesting, that is what I call team building, right? That is seeing the whole package and try to build small groups of focus, right? Monitoring is a focus process. Vulnerability management is a focus process. What you call as a content delivery, most of the time I call engineering, SOC engineering, right? Evolving platforms, developing integration, the script, and all over that mindset. So I think that is the first big part of any SOC manager or any SOC building is the team building, the creating the small blocks that will be handled together to make the flow, right? Okay, I need to have a monitoring service. I need to have a vulnerability management service. Okay, this is one team for monitoring, another team for vulnerability management, but we do have some capabilities and some groups that are spoiled on the basis of that operation. That is, engineering team will work to all SOC operations. Metrics and governance team should work to all SOC operations, because monitoring governance is different than vulnerability management governance. It's very different from security administration, firewall, antivirus governance as well. So most of the time, I see the lack of that shared layer in some SOC operations. That is engineering, threat intelligence, or fusioning service like intelligence team, intelligence capability, and management capability. So that the lack of that creates a lack of good process, a good monitoring process, vulnerability management process. You see that your operations as well?
Yeah, so the security operations is an ecosystem, and it's an ecosystem of lots of different kind of pods that all feed into each other, and that feed into each other is the process. So the pods are the people, they feed into each other with processes, and they deliver the service through technology. So if you're going to have a vulnerability management team, let's have a process where they feed into the threat intelligence team to understand the exposure, and then that feeds back into the detection team that develop a threat hunt to see if they can find any artifacts related to that threat intelligence, and then they can build a threat hunting process there. I mean, that's just a little process that I just built in my head. It's just that little flow there. And the same could be for content development. A tier 1 analyst picks up an alert. The alert is a false positive. They submit it for tuning. That goes to the engineers or the content development team, who then will develop that new analytic or that new rule to be able to tune out the noise. And then it'll be fed back to the tier 1 analyst to say, yep, that's been done. Can you verify it? Yep, I'll go look and see if I can replay that last analytic. Okay, it didn't fire. Brilliant, that's been done. And we start to have this kind of life cycle where all of these processes start to feed all the teams together. And the beauty of this is you start to get this cross training happen, where the content development, the engineers will start training the tier 1 analysts, and the tier 1 analysts will start learning from the threat intelligence guys, and so on and so forth. And then you start to have an ecosystem that is not just amalgamated together, but works in symphony like an orchestra.
Mm-hmm. So you said something very important, in my opinion, that is communication, right? We do know that there's a lot of big operations here in Brazil. We have big companies, some SOC operations with more than 100 employees, etc. And sometimes they lack of a good communication process. So there's nothing very intelligent in to any city analyst doing monitoring and another 10, 20 analysts doing vulnerability management, and they are not talking with each other, right? So there is no process or no agenda or no schedule to work to make them work together. So this is useless, in my opinion. You know, they could have the same kind of mindset, the same kind of quality with one analyst or two analysts, because they are not making any new effort and any new evolution without that communication. So I think that communication is also a very important, critical part of the team building and the SOC management orchestration. How you are
100%.
working with communication issues right now in this time of most of the time that we are working remotely, right? Using at least 10 different softwares for remote communication in our PC. We are using Google Meet, Zoom, and Teams.
Teams is super challenging, right?
Yeah. And how that communication can work together in your operation right now? How you are working on that?
So I think it doesn't really matter what communication platform you use. It's all about how you use it. And I think that comes from good management to say, right, in the morning, we're going to have a 15-minute to 20-minute stand-up call where we're going to get together. We're going to discuss how we're going to approach the day. What problems do we have? Is there anything stopping us from achieving our objectives? And we're going to go forward from there. And then during the week, we're going to select one or two analysts to present a topic that they've been working on. So let's just say that one of the analysts has been working on studying for OSCP, right? That analyst is now going to deliver a talk on offensive security in a couple of weeks' time. So they all come together again and they start talking about offensive security and they start to communicate. And tabletop exercises as well. If you have an incident response plan, tabletop exercise it. You know, select a group of analysts, invite them randomly into a room and saying, right, I need you all to investigate this P1 alert. Little do they know that P1 alert is actually fake. And then they're going to go through a tabletop exercise just to get them to communicate with each other. The benefit of that is they don't just become a number of analysts. They become instant responders. They become good communicators. They improve, they start to become more confident, and you start to approach security a little bit better. You start to improve the people, going back to that whole security is a people problem. So if you start to get people together and force people to work together, so you do that tabletop exercise that requires them to communicate and share ideas and share information, then you're going to get a much better team. So it doesn't matter about the platform, it's all about how you use that platform.
Mm-hmm. So create some strategies to make them work together, right? So kind of some shared goal between teams, right? We can create a shared goal between vulnerability management and monitoring, so they need to talk with together. Or also, as you said, most of the times in companies here, we do know that companies that they create the operation and they don't test the operation. It's the same thing in IT perspective to have a backup and don't test the recovery, right? So they don't know how that will work. We can recover or not. We tested the backup. We have space to recover that backup. We have process to recover that backup or not. So many times we can see operations that are struggling to recover from an incident, even though they have the process, even though they have all the playbooks, even though they have all infrastructure and technology, but they didn't test it. They didn't communicate well to do that. So in the time of the incident. So for me, it's just like as a Brazilian going to the World Cup without training. Okay, we can build a lot of good people and go to the World Cup and they never train it together. Will not work. Never. Will never work this way. So I think that also testing and training and trying it out something is a very important part of the team building strategy as well. So it's not only the building, but rebuilding, the testing and rebuilding and changing, adapting, right?
Yeah, something that I've done that's been incredibly successful was one of the SOCs that I used to be in. There was an analyst that was actually training to be a pen tester, and I set up a virtual machine, connected it to the SIM, and said, right, I want you to attack this machine with everything you've got. And it started generating alerts after alerts. And our SOC was going, what's going on? We're being hacked. You know, this is a real deal. I said, yeah, it's a real deal. Let's go respond to it. So they jumped onto a tech call, you know, about 5 or 10 analysts in the same room. I was there just overseeing it. I knew what was going on. I knew it wasn't a real deal, so I could breathe easily. But we started to have a lot of panic. And I said, well, can somebody pick up the playbook, please? You know, this is a reverse shell. Can somebody pick up the playbook? I don't know what a playbook is. Okay, that's problem one. So probably they're not communicated, the playbooks. Someone found the playbook and they had to go through it. And I said, all right, okay. I said, what tools do we have available to investigate this reverse shell? And they said, oh, you know, log on to the EDR. Okay, right, okay. So we know how to get visibility of this and how to respond. Have we gauged the impact? Have we done the identification stage? No, we haven't. We've gone straight to containment. I said, all right, okay. I put a fake web server on this virtual machine. So I said to them, you do realize that was a critical web server that we've just taken down. We've not informed the website team that we're taking this down, and they haven't been able to put up a replacement, or they've not been able to spin up a backup. And I found that was a really interesting way, not only to get an analyst to train their offensive security skills, but to also have a kind of purple team engagement to really start to light the fire underneath the feet of the analyst to say, hey, you know, let's not get complacent. You know, I know you're dealing with a lot of false positives, but here's a true positive, and this is what happens when it kicks off. And all of a sudden, you start to see where the weak points are. And the weak points in the training, in the playbooks, in the processes, in the communication plans, and it all comes to light. And I think that that's a really fantastic way that if you do have the resources to spin up a virtual machine, have somebody attack it, treat it like a real exercise, you're going to get a really good response. You're going to learn some lessons. And I would say if you've got the opportunity, go and do it.
Excellent. And I think that is something that is very, very critical for incident response time as well. That is to have the team very not panicked, right? Because anytime that team needs to respond and they start to panic, everything goes down. So we need to be trained to this kind of thing, to start working with our heart and still breathe, still have the mindset to be continuous to do our thing, and one thing and two things and third thing, etc., and avoid panicking, because panic management is also part of our training, right? Panic management is also part of the continuous training, as same thing as, for instance, for a professor that you start to lecture for the first time, probably he'll panic, probably he'll break down in that room, right? So we need to keep improving that thing, because when the real time comes, the team need to be very focused. They need to be very light to work that way. Because it's not this way. They will panic and the response will not go well the same way, right? So Ivan, please.
Okay. Before you go, Jay, I'm thinking here. I would like to explore two different points in the same question, right? First of all, it's more you have a really interesting career journey, because you start, if I'm not wrong, in the red side. You start with the pen testing and then you move to the blue side, right? So in general, that we can notice now that people prefer to be a hacker and they prefer stay in the red side. So at least in Brazil, right? So in the same question, if you can comment about that. So how you decide to go to the blue teams area, and then what your suggestion, what your playbook for people that is planning work in the blue team or becomes a better SOC analyst?
Yeah, so I start my first role was actually a junior SOC analyst, and then I thought, right, all I want to do is pen testing. I just want to become a hacker. So I started studying, started doing Hack the Box for day in, day out, night after night. And eventually I got a role after a couple of years of being a pen tester. And I soon realized it wasn't actually that exciting as I thought it was going to be. I mean, you do a test and then a couple of days later, you spend a week writing a report. And for me, I didn't enjoy that. So I thought, right, I want to go back to being a SOC, because when you look at it from a SOC perspective, and you look at the blue team side, the blue team is more valued by the business than a red team. The business have more of a requirement to reduce impact and respond to incidents than to perform a pen test. So they're going to have a defensive security specialist in pretty much every business. They're not always going to have a pen tester. So for me, defensive security was more popular by default because of business requirement. So I thought, right, that's going to be a very good career. I have a lot of growth there. So I started thinking, right, I need to get out of this red mindset that I've put myself into and start thinking back to blue. Now, the beauty of it is it's the old art of war adage, if you know your enemy, you know yourself, you know the outcome of 1,000 battles. And for me, it's very true. If you know offensive security, it makes you a really good SOC analyst, because you know the kind of attacks, how they're going to appear, where they could appear, and what logs you need to look at to be able to identify them. And I think that's incredibly powerful. That if you're a SOC analyst and you're struggling to improve, go hack something, go do hack the box, go try and break something, and then try and see how you broke it. One of the most popular things that I've done, and I wrote a blog about it before, was I made a virtual machine and I deployed that virtual machine as a vulnerable machine. And I connected it to an instance of SIM, a free version of Splunk. And I attacked that machine. And I said to myself, right, I want to see if I can find out where I came in, how I escalated, if I can detect my escalation, and see if I can map out my attack pattern. And I thought that is a really fantastic way of being able to basically turn purple, attack something, and then find yourself doing it. I mean, I know it's cheating because I know how I did it, but being able to build the queries and visualize that attack, it makes you a better analyst, because you start to understand the attack. Instead of looking for alerts, you start to look for tactics and procedures. You're looking for TTPs. We're looking for ways to find the behavior of an attacker, not just the alert that's been generated. And I think that's what makes you really good.
Great.
Totally agree.
What about the specific advice for people looking for become better SOC analysts? What do you suggest for them?
So if you wanted to become a better SOC analyst, so if you're a SOC analyst now and you want to become better, you'll need to analyze yourself. You need to understand what you're currently weak at, and if you do need to improve in that area. A lot of the times, people that come into the SOC, they've done a cybersecurity boot camp that may have not taught them everything, and they may have weak foundations. And those weak foundations can really hinder you from developing and becoming better at your career. So a lot of times I say to people, right, spend at least 6 months going back to the absolute basics. Do your networking again, do your Security Plus course again, and start to understand that a little bit better. And then start to look at the more advanced stuff. So look at where you want to go. So let's just say I'm a tier 1 analyst. I want to become digital forensics expert. Okay, right. What do you need to know from where you are now to where you want to go? Analyze your current position, analyze job descriptions of a DFIR analyst, understand the different requirements, and based on that, build a study plan to say, right, I'm here, I want to go there. This is what I need to learn. And these are the courses that I need to do to get there. And these are the certifications that are going to make me more employable in that area. And I think that's one of the best bit of advice I give people is to analyze yourself now, where you want to go, build a plan, pick the courses and stick to that plan.
Fantastic.
And of course, people can use their leadership support on that, right? Most of the time that I work with some teams, I poke them that, okay, you have a clear mindset where you want to go. If you have that mindset, I can support you. I can help you to achieve that and suggest you something and to start studying with you something. But it will not work if you consider my own opinion or I think that you should do that, or I think that you should do that. It's not working like that. So first, people should be in place to have their own decision. There is capability for analysts and also for managers. The same way you said as manager perspective, we need to take our time to evaluate and decide by ourselves, and after that, do some action, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jay. It was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for your whole support. We are very grateful that you're here with us. We are looking forward to work with you all over again, and can't wait for see what you're bringing more for our community. Do you have any final message to Brazilian community, Brazilian people regarding security operations? We are seeing some Brazilian action in cybersecurity or blue teams operations.
No matter where you are, if you're in security operations, look after yourself. So if you have a moment, go outside, go for a walk, take a breather, put the technology down, and just look after your own mental health.
Excellent, excellent.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much,
Jay.
Brilliant.
Very
Thank you
nice
very
to have you here.
Have you here.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
much. Take care. Goodbye.
Isso aí, pessoal. Obrigado aí pela participação de todos.
E aí, pessoal?
E eu queria destacar um ponto que, inclusive, foi falado no final, né? Que excelente apresentação do Jay Jay. Não temos o que falar disso daí. O cara é fantástico, a visão dele é fantástica. Vai muito de encontro com aquilo que eu e o Bruno, a gente vem conversando. A gente estava aqui fofocando por trás dos bastidores e falando sobre a apresentação. E um ponto que me chamou a atenção da apresentação dele foi justamente no final ele falar que trabalhar em SOC é você enxergar a melhoria constante, né, contínua. E isso daí é... Realmente, a gente não pode se limitar àquilo que a gente tem dentro da organização. Achei interessante, Bruno, a parte que ele fala justamente de pessoas, né? A gente tem falado tanto disso aí dentro das nossas lives aí dentro do SOC Brasil. A gente tem falado tanto da parte de processos, entre outras coisas. E a gente vê que não é uma visão do nosso lado, né? Você vê que isso aí acaba sendo mundial. Você comentou ali um negócio interessante que na presença do Chris Crowley, ele é focado no segmento, o Rob tem outra visão, e agora pegando o JJ, ele tem essa visão de pessoas, mas que ambos fazem ali faz ali três peças que fazem a engrenagem girar, né? Então é importantíssimo, mais uma vez, aí a gente se preocupar com esse alinhamento de todas as frentes, né? Para que a engrenagem rode ali com sua devida perfeição, né?
Exato. O que a gente fala, às vezes, dentro de Security Operations, né? É que o que a gente faz, né? A operação, ela não é o objetivo final. Ela é um processo por onde a gente vai chegar no objetivo final. O nosso objetivo final é melhorar a capacidade de segurança da empresa. Ponto. Eu posso melhorar a capacidade de segurança da empresa efetuando certas atividades de monitoração de segurança, de gestão de vulnerabilidade, etc. Mas durante esse processo, muitas vezes eu vou perceber oportunidades. Eu vou perceber oportunidade de melhoria, eu vou perceber oportunidade de pessoas, eu vou perceber oportunidade de processo e de tecnologias. E eu não posso ficar calado. Eu tenho que enxergar essas oportunidades e colocar essas oportunidades em linha, né? Então, dentro de Security Operations, a gente precisa ter a capacidade de perceber oportunidades de melhoria e implantar essas oportunidades de melhoria. Se a gente não implanta elas, não resolve. Tu tá no mudo, só para avisar.
Bruno, eu posso te cortar?
Fica à vontade.
Vamos deixar esse bate-papo para amanhã com o nosso fechamento da semana?
Vamos sim, vamos sim.
Vamos,
então,
que
assim,
amanhã
pessoal,
a gente vai fazer um encontro aí, debatendo todos
esse wrap-up, né,
a revisão aí,
né,
né?
que a gente discutiu.
Isso.
Mas, assim, um ponto, acho que bem interessante do bate-papo do Jay aqui, que fica para todo mundo que está nos assistindo, você, enquanto um profissional de segurança, precisa entender o ecossistema que você está inserido também, né? Então, entender que você faz parte desse ecossistema, que você tem que buscar novos conhecimentos. O conhecimento ofensivo é importante para o profissional de defesa, o conhecimento defensivo é importante para o profissional de ataque, né, ofensivo, e buscar essa sua própria evolução. É isso que vai fazer, né, a sua evolução profissional, a empresa, qualquer que você esteja, sua liderança, seu líder, podem te ajudar nesse processo. Mas, mais do que nunca, eu acho que o último recado do Jay é fundamental e bate com o que a gente já falou em algumas lives do SOC Brasil, que é você tem que ter uma capacidade de fazer isso com uma saúde mental, né? Com uma boa saúde mental, com uma boa saúde física. Se você não tiver uma boa saúde mental, uma boa saúde física, nada disso para em pé, nada disso faz sentido a longo prazo e você vai estar entrando ali numa zona cinzenta, numa zona muito perigosa. Né? Mas a gente pode deixar para finalizar amanhã. Pessoal,
deixar
obrigado
você
pela
dar essa aula aí
presença de
só amanhã,
vocês.
né, Bruno?
Nada, que isso. Ó, o Mauro está até comentando, né? A gente está fazendo aqui um bate-papo, Mauro. Hoje não tem um processo ali, né? Um momento das comunidades, né? Hoje a gente não conseguiu trazer para vocês um momento das comunidades, mas a gente está fazendo aqui um fechamento dessa discussão que a gente teve com o Jay. Se vocês tiverem perguntas, fiquem à vontade para usar ali o Q&A, né? Então, a gente deixa mais um tempo aqui, mais uns 15 minutos para responder as dúvidas de vocês, situações que vocês tiverem. Fiquem à vontade para jogar ali no Q&A ou aqui no chat, que a gente pode debater e interagir com vocês. O Klemer só puxou aqui minha orelha, porque muitas das coisas que a gente estava discutindo aqui nos bastidores tem a ver com um fechamento geral, né, de várias coisas que a gente ouviu durante essa semana, do Chris, do Rob, do Jay, do Joe. Então, assim, eu acho que isso tudo a gente pode deixar para discutir amanhã, para fazer esse fechamento geral combinado, né? E evitar aqui criar um momento de antecipação, né? Até para vocês poderem estar com a gente amanhã de novo, caramba. A gente quer vocês amanhã de novo aqui.
Essa é a ideia. Por isso que eu falei, opa, parou, chega. Senão a gente fica sem spoilers, a gente já dando spoilers de amanhã já.
Exato.
Amanhã estaremos todo mundo no ritmo da Copa com a vitória do Brasil, de preferência todos os convidados com a camisa do Brasil. E como a Abel acabou de falar, sextou happy hour.
A Bel lembrou uma coisa legal. Amanhã, no nosso fechamento, a ideia é um grande happy hour de encerramento.
Isso aí.
Né? Então, tragam as biritas de vocês, para quem é de birita, para quem é de café, traga seu café, para quem é de água, traga a sua água. Que a ideia é a gente fazer uma grande discussão geral aqui, um brinde de fechamento de ano, agradecimento de vocês, agradecimento de todos os parceiros aqui, as meninas, a Bel, Marise. Então, fique à vontade amanhã para vir de uma forma bem descontraída, porque a ideia amanhã é fazer um grande evento, né? Então, inclusive, a gente vai tentar abrir para que vocês participem mesmo, possam interagir com voz, etc., para a gente fazer um grande brinde para quem estiver aqui com a gente.
Excelente esse ponto aí que você colocou, Bruno. Pessoal,
legal?
A gente vai fechando por aqui o dia de hoje. Caso vimos aí que não teve nenhuma pergunta, então é porque foi tudo muito bem explicado. E caso tenham perguntas, tragam para amanhã. Amanhã estaremos aqui no mesmo bate-local, mesmo bate-horário, a partir das 8 horas da noite, né, 20 horas. E foi com a presença aí do nosso amigo Bruno Guerreiro, Ivan Salles. Acredito que o Lucas Bert e demais companheiros do SOC Brasil estarão presentes nesse bate-papo de amanhã. Obrigado pela presença de todos. Obrigado, Bruno, mais uma vez. Obrigado, Bel.
Eu que agradeço, pessoal.
Dá o ar da cara aí pro pessoal e dá um tchauzinho para todos aí.
Bel, para de se esconder, Bel.
Bel. Olha ela aí.
Tá
chegando
aí.
Até mais, pessoal. Valeu,
Tchau, galera.
Tchau.
Tchau, valeu.
Até mais.